Victoria Hayes walked into her mother's living room, looked her ex-fiancé, Alexander Reed, dead in the eyes. The man her mother had secretly invited to destroy her, and said loud enough for every person in that room to hear, "He's not my date. He's the man I've been in love with for the past 8 months. And the moment you try to humiliate him the way I know you're planning to, I walk out of this wedding and you never see me again." The room went completely silent. Her mother's champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Alexander Reed's smile didn't disappear. It just went cold. And Nathan Walker, Navy petty officer, single father, a man who drove a truck with bad tires and made breakfast at 4:45 every morning, stood in the doorway behind her in his uniform and said absolutely nothing, because he didn't need to. Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button because what happens next in that room will change everything you think you know about this story. The alarm went off at 4:45 in the morning, same as always. Nathan Walker didn't groan. He didn't hit snooze. He sat up in the dark, put both feet on the cold hardwood floor, and just breathed for a moment, because that was the only luxury a man in his position was allowed. One breath, maybe two. Then the day started. He could hear the apartment around him. The hum of the refrigerator. The faint sound of a car passing on the street below. The soft, steady breathing coming through the cracked door down the hall where his 7-year-old son Marcus was still sleeping. That one sound was the reason Nathan got up every single morning without complaint. He stood, rolled his shoulders, and moved into the kitchen. The coffee maker was old and made a sound like a tired engine, but it worked, and Nathan had long ago stopped caring about things that worked fine, but didn't look impressive. He pulled out a pan, cracked 4 eggs, and started moving. Toast in the toaster. Orange juice poured before the bread popped. Bacon already sliced from the night before. In 14 minutes, flat breakfast was on the table, covered with a dish towel to keep it warm. Then he went back down the hall. Marcus. He pushed the door open gently. Buddy. Time. A lump under the blanket shifted. A small hand reached out and grabbed the blanket tighter. 5 more minutes. Marcus mumbled into the pillow. That's what you said 5 minutes ago. No, I didn't. I was asleep. Nathan almost smiled. Almost. Breakfast is ready. Don't let it get cold. He left the door open and walked back to get dressed. His uniform was already pressed, hanging on the back of the closet door, where he put it every night before bed. He put it on the same way every morning, methodical, practiced each piece in order. There was something grounding about it. Something that reminded him who he was when everything else felt uncertain. He was a United States Navy petty officer. He had served for 11 years. He had done his job well. He had come home. Not everyone did. He buttoned the last button and looked at himself in the small mirror above the dresser. Behind his reflection on the nightstand, there was a photograph. A woman with dark eyes and a wide laugh, her arm around a much younger Nathan, both of them standing outside a courthouse after their wedding. A $20 ceremony. A paper cup of champagne. The best day of his life. Carla had been gone for 3 years. I didn't look at the photograph for long. He never did. It wasn't because he'd stopped loving her. It was because looking too long made it harder to move, and Nathan Walker needed to keep moving. Dad. Marcus appeared in the doorway, hair pointing in 4 directions, sock on only 1 foot. Can I bring my book to school today? Which book? The one about the submarines. You already read that book twice. I know. Marcus shrugged like that was completely irrelevant. I want to read it again. Eat first, then grab the book. Marcus shuffled toward the kitchen. Nathan watched him go, this 7-year-old with Carla's eyes and his own stubborn jaw, and felt something in his chest that he didn't have a word for. It wasn't sadness exactly. It was heavier than pride. It was the feeling of knowing that this small person trusted him completely, and that there was nothing in the world Nathan would not do to deserve that trust. He ate standing up the way he always did when he was running close on time. Marcus sat at the table, fork in one hand, submarine book already open beside his plate, reading between bites. You're supposed to be eating, Nathan said. I am eating. You're reading. I can do both. Nathan looked at the book, then at his son. Eat faster. Dad. Marcus. A brief standoff. Then Marcus put the book down with exaggerated drama and applied himself to breakfast. Nathan drank his coffee and thought not for the first time that raising this kid alone was somehow both the hardest thing he had ever done and the only thing that felt completely worth doing. He dropped Marcus at school by 7:15, watched him disappear through the front doors without looking back, because Marcus never looked back. He was already somewhere else in his head, and then Nathan drove to the base. I had been assigned as a security liaison for Hayes Defense Technologies for the past 8 months. The arrangement was unusual, but not unprecedented. Victoria Hayes's company held several active defense contracts with the Department of the Navy, and given recent concerns about corporate espionage and a series of threats the company had received from a rival overseas entity, the Navy had agreed to embed a liaison officer at the company's headquarters. Someone who could work directly with Hayes's internal security team, review threat assessments, and serve as a point of contact between the company and the military. They sent Nathan. He didn't know why they picked him specifically. His supervisor said it was because of his record and his clearance level. Nathan suspected it was also because he was quiet and didn't complain and could get along with pretty much anyone, which was a useful quality when you were spending your days inside a building full of people who wore suits that cost more than his car. The first time he walked into Hayes Defense Technologies headquarters, he took a long look around the lobby and thought, "This is not my world." The lobby alone was the size of a small aircraft hangar. Glass everywhere. A wall of screens showing real-time data and news feeds. People moving with the specific kind of urgency that came not from actual emergencies, but from the performance of importance. Everyone looked expensive. Everything looked designed. He checked in at the security desk, was given a badge, and was told that Ms. Hayes would see him at 9. "Ms. Hayes runs tight," the security manager told him. A retired Marine named Gerald, who had short gray hair and the posture of someone who had never fully left the military. "She's not unfriendly, but she doesn't waste time. Say what you mean and don't dress it up." "Understood," Nathan said. "And don't let the office intimidate you. It's designed to." Nathan nodded. He had stood on the deck of a destroyer in 40-foot swells at 2 in the morning. I was reasonably confident he could handle an office. He was almost right. Victoria Hayes's office occupied the entire top corner of the building. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A desk that was longer than most living rooms. And behind that desk, standing with her back to the door and looking out at the city, was a woman who wore her authority the way Nathan wore his uniform, like it was part of her skin. She turned when he entered. She was younger than he expected. Mid-30s, dark hair pulled back clean, a gray blazer. She looked at him the way she probably looked at every assessment she'd ever made, quickly, completely, and without giving anything away. "Petty Officer Walker," she said. "Ms. Hayes." "Sit down." He did. She remained standing, which he recognized as a dominance posture, and noted it without reacting to it. "I reviewed your file," she said. 11 years, multiple deployments, commendations, no disciplinary record, cleared at the appropriate level." "That's right." "Do you know why I asked for you specifically?" He blinked. "I was told the Navy assigned me. The Navy gave me 3 candidates. I asked for you." She sat down now across from him. "Because the other 2 had political affiliations that would complicate this work and you don't. Because you have a kid, which means your judgment about risk is calibrated differently than someone with nothing to lose. And because I read your statement from the Keller incident in 2021, and I thought it showed a specific kind of restraint that I need in someone working in my building." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "You did your research." "I always do." A pause. "I don't trust easily, Petty Officer. I'm telling you this now so there are no misunderstandings later. I need someone whose job is to be objective, not to make me feel comfortable, not to tell me what I want to hear. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Then we'll get along fine." She was right. They did get along. Not easily at first, Victoria Hayes was not an easy person to get along with. She had expectations, and she held people to them without apology. She was direct to the point of bluntness. She had no patience for posturing or excuses. She asked hard questions and expected real answers. Nathan, who had spent 11 years in a culture that valued exactly those qualities, found her almost refreshing. Slowly over weeks, a working rhythm developed. He attended her morning briefings. He reviewed security protocols. He sat through meetings and said very little, mostly watching, occasionally offering an assessment when she asked for one. She asked more often than he expected, and sometimes when the building was mostly empty and the day had run long, she would sit across from him in the small conference room they used for debriefs and talk. Not about security, but about the actual weight of running something that depended entirely on your own judgment and your ability to make the right call when everything was uncertain. He understood that. Maybe more than she realized. One evening in early October, about 4 months into the arrangement, she asked him about Marcus for the first time. She'd seen the photo on his badge. Nathan had put a small one there, a thing he did on every assignment, a reminder, and she'd asked offhand, "Your son?" "Yes." "How old?" 7. She nodded slowly. "Does he know what you do?" "He knows I keep people safe." A pause. "He also knows I'm gone sometimes. We've talked about that a lot." Victoria looked at the photograph on his badge for a moment. Then she said quietly, "That must be a hard conversation to have with a 7-year-old. "It is," Nathan said, "but not having it would be harder." Something shifted in her face when he said that. Small. She covered it quickly, the way she covered everything efficiently, without drawing attention to it. But he saw it. He filed it away without comment. The call came on a Wednesday morning in November, 6 weeks before her sister Sophie's wedding. Nathan was at his desk in the liaison office when his phone buzzed. Victoria's direct line. He answered. "Walker. I need you to come upstairs." Her voice was controlled, but he had learned to hear what lived beneath her control. There was something under it today, something tighter than usual. "Now. Please." He went upstairs. She was at her desk when he came in, but she wasn't working. She was sitting with both hands flat on the surface, and her eyes on something that wasn't in the room. He recognized that look. He'd worn it himself after Carla died in the weeks when the world kept moving, and he kept trying to figure out how to move with it. He closed the door behind him and sat down without being asked. She looked up. "I need to ask you something." "Okay. I need you to understand that you can say no, and it will not affect our working relationship, and I will not hold it against you." He waited. Victoria Hayes, who had negotiated billion-dollar contracts and faced down boardrooms and built a company from nothing. At the age of 28, sat across from him and looked just briefly like someone who was not sure how to say what she needed to say. Then she said it. "I need you to come with me to my sister's wedding." Nathan kept his expression neutral. "As security?" "No." She held his gaze. "As my boyfriend." The room was very quiet. Nathan was a man who had learned to think before he responded, an operational habit, but also just who he was. He thought now. He looked at her face, which was as composed as ever. And he thought about what it meant that Victoria Hayes, a woman who managed everything in her life with precision and control, was sitting across from him, looking like she wasn't sure what he was going to say. "Tell me what's actually happening," he said. She exhaled, just barely. "My family has been pressure doesn't quite cover it. My sister is marrying a man from a very established family. My mother has been using this wedding as an opportunity to remind every branch of the Hayes family tree what success looks like and what it's supposed to look like going forward." A pause. "She has decided that my romantic situation is an embarrassment. She has invited my ex-fiancé without telling me. His name is Alexander Reed. He and my mother have apparently been in contact, and she believes this would be a good opportunity for a reconciliation. And you don't. Alexander Reed is one of the most calculating men I have ever met. Everything he does has a return attached to it. Our engagement ended because I discovered he had been in quiet conversations with 2 of my board members about a potential restructuring of the company in the event that we merged our holdings. Conversations he never told me about. He was planning a financial maneuver using our relationship as the mechanism." She said it evenly, the way you said something that had already been processed, already been put behind glass where it couldn't hurt you anymore. So no, I don't. And you need someone there with you. I need someone there who isn't afraid of him, or my mother, or any of the rest of it." She paused. Someone who can stand in that room and not be impressed by any of the things those people use to make other people feel small. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "You know your family is going to look at me and see exactly what they want to see." "Yes. A sailor, a single dad, someone who doesn't fit." "I know. And that doesn't concern you, Nathan." It was the first time she had used his first name, he realized. It caught him slightly off guard. "The concern I have is what happens if I walk into that weekend alone. Or worse, if Alexander is standing there with my mother's support, and I have no one in my corner who actually means something." She looked at him steadily. "You mean something. Whether you know it or not, you're the one person in my life right now who talks to me like a human being instead of a transaction. I need that in that room." He thought about it. He thought about Marcus, and about the weekend, and about the fact that what she was describing was complicated in ways that would not fully reveal themselves until they were already inside it. Then he thought about the look she'd had on her face just for a moment when she made the ask. Victoria Hayes did not ask for things. That was the thing about her that most people probably never saw because she was so good at making everything look like a decision. But this was not a decision. This was someone reaching out a hand in the dark and hoping there was something to hold on to. "I'd need the weekend," he said. "I'd need to arrange care for Marcus." "Of course. I'll cover any—" "You don't need to cover anything," he said. "I'll figure it out." A pause. Something crossed her face that he didn't quite have a name for. "Okay. And I'm going in my uniform," he said. "If you're asking me to be there as myself, that's part of myself." She looked at him for a long moment. "I wouldn't have it any other way." He called his sister-in-law Denise that night. Denise had been a constant presence since Carla died, not in a suffocating way, but in the way of someone who understood that showing up quietly was sometimes more valuable than showing up loudly. She watched Marcus 2 or 3 times a month, kept a go-bag at her apartment for Nathan's irregular schedule, and had made it clear more than once that she was not doing it out of obligation. She was doing it because Marcus was Carla's son, and she loved him. Nathan called her and explained the situation as plainly as he could, which in his case meant he left out most of the emotional complexity and described the logistical facts. "You're going to a billionaire's sister's wedding," Denise said. "I'm providing support to someone from work." "It's a professional situation. Nathan, the last professional situation you described to me was the time you stayed 3 hours late to review a threat assessment, and you didn't mention until 2 weeks later that you'd also eaten dinner with her." He was quiet. "I'll take Marcus," she said. "Obviously. But when you get back, you're telling me everything." "There might not be anything to tell." "Okay, Nathan." He hung up and stood in his kitchen for a moment. Through the hall, he could hear Marcus running water in the bathroom, doing his nightly routine with the chaotic efficiency of a small person who wanted to be done with brushing his teeth so he could read for 10 more minutes before lights out. Nathan walked down the hall and knocked on the bathroom door frame. 2 minutes. Marcus looked up, toothbrush in cheek. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "The lady from your work, Ms. Hayes." He spit and rinsed. "Is she nice?" Nathan considered the question. "She's honest," he said. "She says what she means." "Is that the same as nice?" He looked at his son, 7 years old, and already asking the right questions. "Sometimes," he said. "Maybe the best kind." Marcus seemed to accept this. He put down the toothbrush and looked up at his father. "Dad, if you ever—" He stopped. "If I ever what?" Marcus looked at the sink. "Nothing. You started a sentence." "It's dumb. Try me." A pause. Then quietly. "If you ever liked someone again, liked them, you wouldn't have to hide it. I wouldn't be weird about it." Nathan went very still. Marcus still wasn't looking at him. I heard Grandma say once that you don't let yourself be happy because you think I'd be sad, and I wouldn't. I just wanted you to know. Nathan crouched down, so he was at eye level with his son. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. He looked at this kid, this 7-year-old, who had already lost his mother, and had spent 3 years watching his father hold everything together quietly every day, and he felt something break open in him gently, like a window letting in air. "I know, buddy," he said. "I know." Marcus nodded satisfied, and then immediately returned to the important business of getting 10 more minutes of reading because he was 7, and the emotional weight of that moment had already been filed and moved past. Nathan stayed crouching in the doorway for a moment longer. Then he stood up, turned off the bathroom light, and went to figure out what you wore to a billionaire's family wedding when all you had was a uniform and a reason to be there. He drove to the airport Friday morning in his old truck. Victoria had arranged the flight private, of course, because of course she had. And when Nathan arrived at the private terminal and saw the aircraft, he stopped walking for exactly 2 seconds, then kept going because stopping was how you let things intimidate you. Victoria was already there. She wore a dark blue coat and had her phone in her hand and was frowning at it in the way she frowned at everything. Not with frustration, but with focus. Like the problem in front of her was simply a puzzle she hadn't finished solving yet. She looked up when he approached. Her eyes moved to his uniform. Something in her expression settled like a tension she hadn't been aware of releasing. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Yes, ma'am. You don't have to call me that." "I know." He glanced at the aircraft. "Nice plane." "It belongs to the company." "Everything belongs to the company." She almost smiled. "Most things." She put her phone away. "How's Marcus?" "Staying with his aunt. Already negotiated for an extra hour of video games while I'm gone. Smart kid. He's going to be trouble by the time he's 12. She did smile, then small and real. "I want to tell you something before we board," she said. "My family is," she paused, "complex. My mother operates from a very specific set of assumptions about what success looks like and what people are worth. She's going to be unkind to you. Not overtly, maybe, but in the specific way that people who have a lot of practice at it are unkind. I've handled worse. I know you have. I just wanted you to know that whatever she says, whatever any of them say, I need you to know that I don't see you the way they see you." The morning light was coming in through the terminal windows. Nathan looked at her for a moment. Not at the CEO, not at the woman who had negotiated his assignment. Just at Victoria, the person underneath all the rest of it, who had sat across from him in a quiet conference room and talked about what it meant to carry something heavy for a very long time. "I know," he said. They boarded the plane. The flight was 2.5 hours. They sat across from each other. The plane was quiet, staffed by 2 crew members who were professionally invisible. For the first hour, Victoria worked. She had a briefing document on her tablet and went through it with complete focus, making notes in the margins, occasionally sending a message to someone on her team. Nathan sat across from her and looked out the window and thought. I thought about what Marcus had said in the bathroom. I wouldn't be weird about it. He thought about the weight of that, the way a child's simple honesty could land harder than almost any other kind. He thought about Carla, and about the years since, and about the strange fact that he was 39 years old and sitting on a private plane on his way to an oceanfront estate because a woman he admired had needed someone in her corner and thought of him. After an hour, Victoria put down the tablet. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure." "When you lost your wife..." She paused. "You don't have to answer this." "It's fine. Ask." She looked at her hands for a moment. "When you lost her, how did you keep functioning? How did you know how to keep going?" Nathan thought about it honestly. "I didn't know," he said. "There wasn't a moment when I figured it out. I just woke up the next morning and Marcus needed breakfast, so I made breakfast. And then the morning after that. And after a while, it wasn't about figuring anything out. It was just about the next thing, the next meal, the next school pickup, the next phone call to her parents, just one thing at a time. And that was enough." "No," he said. "But it was what there was. And what there was, I could do." He looked at her. Why? She was quiet for a moment. Then, I've been running this company for 9 years. I started it when I was 26, with money I borrowed from a bank that didn't fully believe in me. I've worked 18-hour days for most of that time. I have more than 2,000 people whose livelihoods depend on decisions I make. And there are days, more of them recently, when I wake up in the morning and I genuinely don't know why I'm doing any of it. She said it carefully, like she was testing the words for the first time. I don't mean that in a dramatic way. I just mean that I've optimized every part of my life for success, and I'm not sure I remember what I was trying to succeed for. Nathan didn't respond immediately. He let that sit for a moment, the way you let important things sit. Then he said, "You called me." She looked at him. "What?" "When you needed someone in your corner for this weekend, you had a list of people to call, and you called me. A Navy liaison officer you've known for 8 months who lives in a 2-bedroom apartment and drives a truck that needs new tires." He held her gaze. "That wasn't an accident." Victoria said nothing. "You already know what you were trying to succeed for," he said. "You're just afraid to say it out loud because the answer doesn't look the way you thought it would." She looked at him for a long time. The plane shifted slightly through a pocket of turbulence, and neither of them moved. "You're going to be a problem," she said finally. "You know that. I've been told that before." "I'm sure you have." She picked up the tablet again, but she wasn't looking at it. He could see that. She was looking at the window, at the clouds below the plane, at something a long way off. He turned back to the window. Outside the country, spread out below them fields and highways, and the small particular shapes of 1,000 ordinary lives. And somewhere down there, a 7-year-old boy with Carla's eyes was probably already on chapter 4 of his submarine book, and the world was still moving, and Nathan Walker was still in it, and somehow that felt for just this moment like enough. When the plane began to descend toward California, Victoria looked up from the tablet and said quietly, "Thank you for coming." "You already said that." "I know." She looked out the window. "I wanted to say it again." The wheels touched down. The estate was 40 minutes away. Her family was already there, and everything. Every carefully kept distance, every professional line, everything that had been building quietly for 8 months between a billionaire CEO and a Navy petty officer who made breakfast every morning at 4:45 and put a photograph on his badge so he'd never forget what he was doing. This all four was about to become impossible to pretend had never been real. The car pulled through the gates of the estate as the sun hit the water, and Nathan Walker looked out the window at the world he was walking into and thought, whatever happens in there, you came here because someone needed you. That was reason enough. It had always been reason enough. The car stopped. Nathan stepped out first. He hadn't been told what the estate looked like. He hadn't asked. But when he came around the side of the vehicle and saw the front entrance, the people moving through it, the way they were dressed, the particular way they held themselves, like the world was something that belonged to them, he understood immediately what kind of weekend this was going to be. He adjusted his cover, straightened his jacket, and waited. Victoria came around from the other side of the car. She looked at the entrance, then at him. Something moved across her face. Not fear exactly. More like the expression of someone who had trained for a marathon and was now standing at the starting line, knowing that knowing the route and running it were two completely different things. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said. Then she walked forward. He fell into step beside her. The moment they walked through the front entrance, Nathan felt it. The shift in the air. The way conversations paused, not stopped paused. The way eyes moved toward them and then moved away in that practiced manner of people who considered staring to be beneath them but couldn't quite stop themselves. He had felt this before. Not here, not in a place like this, but on ships, on bases, in rooms where the power structure was immediately visible, and anyone knew was assessed within the first 30 seconds of arrival. He knew how to read a room, and this room was reading him right back. A woman appeared from the center of it. She was tall, impeccably put together, wearing something ivory that probably cost more than Nathan's monthly salary. Her hair was silver blonde, cut close and precise. She had Victoria's bone structure, but none of Victoria's warmth. even the guarded warmth that Victoria kept mostly hidden. This woman had optimized it out of herself entirely. Margaret Hayes. She came toward them with a smile that was geometrically perfect and emotionally empty. Victoria. She kissed her daughter's cheek without actually making contact. Her eyes moved to Nathan immediately. And this must be your guest. Mom. Victoria's voice was even. This is Nathan Walker. Margaret looked at him. Not at his face, not right away. At his uniform. At what it represented. Nathan watched her do the math, the kind of math people like her did, automatically adding up markers of status and rank and social position, and calculating a number that in her system determined exactly how much respect a person was owed. He saw the number she arrived at. Petty officer, she said, because she had clearly done enough research to know his rank. She said it the way you said a title you considered diminutive. Welcome. She turned back to her daughter before he could respond. Come, there are people you need to see. She moved away. She expected Victoria to follow. Victoria didn't move immediately. She looked at Nathan. He gave her a small nod. I'm fine, go. She held his gaze for 1 second longer than necessary. Then she went. Nathan stood in the entrance and took in the room. He was good at this, at standing still in unfamiliar territory, and just watching until the geography of a place became clear. He identified the other guests, the rough family structure, the staff, the exits. He noted the man near the fireplace who was watching him with more specific attention than anyone else in the room. Medium height. Well built in the way of someone who paid for it. Dark suit that was expensive without announcing it. A face that was handsome enough to have opened doors for him his whole life, and intelligent enough to know exactly how to use that. He was maybe 40, maybe a little older. He was looking at Nathan the way people looked at problems they were confident they could solve. Nathan looked back at him calmly, directly, until the man broke contact first. Then Nathan turned and went to find a place to stand where he could see the room. A woman materialized beside him. Late 20s, lighter in coloring than Victoria, with an open face, and the particular brightness of someone who had not yet had the brightness managed out of them by the kind of life that did that to people. You must be Nathan, she said. I am. I'm Sophie. She smiled, and it was real. The bride. The reason for all of this. She gestured at the room around them in a way that made clear she found the whole production somewhat absurd. I've heard about you. That surprised him. From Victoria. Victoria doesn't volunteer information, as I'm sure you know. I heard from my husband's cousin who works in defense procurement and apparently moves in the same professional circles. She tilted her head. But I can also tell from the way my sister walked in here that whatever is happening between you two is not what she told our mother it was. Nathan kept his expression neutral. And what did she tell your mother? Sophie looked at him with an intelligence that reminded him in some way he couldn't fully articulate of Marcus. The same quality of seeing past the thing you were saying to the thing you meant. She told our mother you were a professional contact, someone who could handle the weekend. A pause. Our mother believed that. I didn't. He said nothing. Sophie smiled again. I'm not going to make this awkward. I just wanted to tell you, and you can do whatever you want with this, that I'm glad she brought you. Specifically, not someone from her board, not a colleague in a good suit. You. She glanced across the room to where Victoria was already locked in conversation with several people who had the aggressive body language of people who considered themselves her professional peers. She doesn't bring people places. She hasn't in a long time. Your wedding seemed like a reason, Nathan said. The last 3 family events she came alone, or found reasons not to come at all. Sophie looked at him. So, yes, the wedding seemed like a reason, but I don't think the wedding is actually the reason. She touched his arm briefly, lightly. Be patient with her. She's been managing everything by herself for so long that being taken care of feels dangerous to her. She paused. Does that make sense? More than you know, Nathan said. Sophie studied him for a moment. Then she nodded, satisfied. Good, she said, and moved away into the room because she was the bride and there were 40 other people demanding her attention. Nathan stood where he was and watched the room. Across it, Victoria was listening to something a man in a gray suit was saying to her, nodding at precise intervals, her face composed and professional. She looked completely in control. Then her eyes moved just briefly and found Nathan across the room. He held her gaze for a moment. Then he tilted his head slightly. "You okay?" And she looked back at the man in the gray suit without changing her expression, but something in her shoulders dropped by about 2 degrees. He took that as a yes. Dinner that evening was a formal affair in the main dining room, with a seating arrangement that Nathan was fairly certain had been engineered by someone he suspected Margaret to position him as far from Victoria as possible, while keeping them in the same room. He was seated near the end of the table between a distant cousin who worked in finance and said the word portfolio 7 times in the first 10 minutes, and an older man named Charles, who turned out to be Victoria's late father's brother, and was the first person all evening who shook Nathan's hand and meant it. "Navy," Charles said, looking at the uniform. "What branch?" "Surface warfare. Mostly destroyer assignments." "I did 2 years Army," Charles said. "Long time ago. Different world." He poured himself more wine and looked down the table with the expression of a man who had survived enough of these dinners to have developed a philosophical relationship with their absurdity. "You're braver than most coming into this one. Margaret runs these things like a military campaign, but without the honor code." Nathan almost smiled. "I noticed. She's not a bad woman," Charles said, which was the thing people said about someone when they were being charitable. "She's just spent her entire life believing that love is something you earn by performing well, and she raised both those girls in that belief." He looked toward Victoria far down the table. "One of them figured out the belief was wrong. The other one—" He stopped. "Well, you're here. So maybe she's figuring it out." Nathan looked down the table at Victoria. She was talking to someone on her left, and she was doing the thing he had seen her do in the office, when a conversation was working on multiple levels. The surface conversation and the actual conversation happening underneath it. The thing she was really navigating. Her posture was perfect. Her face was composed. And her hands, which Nathan had learned to read the way you learn to read weather at sea, were very slightly too still. Controlled stillness. The kind that took effort. He watched her for a moment. Then he did something he hadn't planned to do. He picked up his phone, which was face down beside his plate, and sent her a message. "You don't have to perform in here. Not for me." He set the phone back down. Across the table, he saw the moment her phone vibrated. He saw her glance at it. He saw her read it. She didn't look at him. She set the phone down the same way he had face down. But the controlled stillness in her hands very slightly let go. The finance cousin said something about emerging markets. Nathan nodded and thought about the fact that he was at a dinner table that probably cost more per plate than he spent on groceries in a month, in a room full of people who had decided the moment he walked in that he didn't belong here, and he felt not uncomfortable, not intimidated, but clear. He felt clear in a way he recognized from operations. The way you felt when you knew what your job was and you were doing it. His job right now was to be in this room. To be exactly who he was. To not apologize for it. He thought he could manage that. The altercation happened after dinner, in the way that altercations at formal events always happened, not at the table where the structure prevented it, but after, when people moved into more casual arrangements and the structure relaxed, and the things that had been waiting all evening found their way out. Nathan had stepped onto the side terrace mostly to get a few minutes of quiet. He stood at the railing looking out. The air was cool and tasted like salt. He heard footsteps behind him and turned. Alexander Reed. Up close, he was what Nathan had assessed him to be from across the room. A man who had spent his entire life in rooms where he was the most powerful person present, and had built an identity around it. He stood with his hands in his pockets and his chin at a specific angle that communicated without words that he considered this interaction to be something he was doing Nathan a favor by having. "Petty Officer Walker," he said. "Mr. Reed." Reed smiled. It was a good smile, practiced. "I want to be direct with you." "Go ahead." "I think you're a decent man. I mean that." He said it the way you said something you didn't mean. "And I think you probably came into this situation without fully understanding what it is." Nathan waited. "Victoria Hayes is a remarkable woman," Reed continued. She's also a woman who operates from very specific patterns. She keeps people at a distance, and then periodically, she finds someone who feels safe to her. Someone who she can be a different version of herself around temporarily. And then she moves on. Because people like Victoria don't actually change their fundamental architecture. They can't afford to. He paused. I'm not saying this to be unkind. I'm saying it because you seem like someone who deserves to know what you're actually a part of. Nathan looked at him. He took his time with it the way he took his time with things that required an accurate read. Reed was good at this, at wrapping contempt in the language of concern. It was a particular kind of manipulation, and it required a specific response, which was not anger and not agreement. Can I ask you something? Nathan said. Of course. When you had those conversations with her board members, the ones about restructuring the company, using your engagement as a mechanism, did you think she'd find out? Or did you know she would, and you just didn't think it would matter? Reed's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. Something tightened. She told you about that? Yes. And you took her version of events as accurate. I took her version of events as the one I believe, Nathan said. There's a difference. He held Reed's gaze steadily. You're a smart man. I think you can read a room. So read this one. I'm not here because I was recruited into a pattern, or because I don't understand what I'm doing. I'm here because someone I respect needed someone in her corner. That's the whole story. There's no angle. He paused. I know that's hard to understand, but it's the truth. Reed looked at him for a long moment. The practiced ease had gone somewhere else. What was underneath it was harder to read, not quite anger, not quite respect. Something that happened to a man when he encountered something he couldn't immediately categorize. She's going to break your heart, Reed said. And for just a moment, a single moment, it sounded almost like he meant it. Like it was the one true thing he'd said all evening. Maybe, Nathan said. That's not your problem. He turned back to the railing. Reed stood there for another few seconds. Then he went back inside. Nathan looked out at the dark water for a while. He thought about what Reed had said, not the manipulation, not the angle, but the moment at the end when his voice had changed. That moment had been real. And Nathan was honest enough with himself to acknowledge that a man who had once loved Victoria Hayes and lost her probably had his own particular wound around it, regardless of how badly he had behaved. He didn't have sympathy for Reed, but he understood the wound. He took out his phone and called Marcus. Denise picked up. He's already asleep. It's 10:30. Right. He'd lost track of the time zones. I just wanted to hear his voice. I know. A pause. How's it going? It's fine. Nathan? It's complicated. Nathan, my sister married you, and you two were complicated for 3 years before you admitted it to each other, so I understand complicated. How are you actually? I was quiet for a moment. The water moved in the dark below the terrace. She's in there right now, he said, surrounded by people who have decided what she's worth, and she's handling it the way she handles everything by herself. And I'm out here. Then go back in, Denise said simply. I know. Nathan, go back in. He went back in. Victoria was at the edge of the main sitting room, partially separated from the larger group, in a conversation with her mother that was doing everything a conversation could do to look calm while being the opposite of calm. Nathan read it from 20 feet away. He crossed the room. He came up beside Victoria, not between her and her mother, but at her side. Close enough to be present. He didn't say anything. He didn't interrupt. He just stood there. Margaret looked at him with an expression that was politely dismissive and precisely calibrated. We're having a private conversation. Mom, Victoria said. This is a family discussion, Victoria. I'm sure your friend understands. He stays, Victoria said. Margaret's expression shifted by a degree. I was simply explaining. You were explaining that you've been in contact with Alexander for the past 3 months without telling me. You were explaining that you invited him here specifically because you believe that if you put him in the same room as me, the situation would resolve itself in a direction you prefer. Victoria's voice was steady. I'm not angry about it. I just want to be clear that I understand exactly what happened. Margaret was quiet for a moment. She was recalibrating. Nathan could see it the way she was finding a new angle. "I want what's best for you," she said. "That has always been true. And what is best for you is not—" Her eyes moved to Nathan and back. "This." "You don't know what this is," Victoria said. "I know what it looks like. You know what it looks like to you. From inside a set of assumptions about worth and value that you've had since before I was born, and that have made you—" She stopped, took a breath. When she spoke again, her voice was lower. "Mom, I have built something from nothing. I have run a company through 3 recessions, 1 federal investigation that found nothing, a pandemic, and a hostile takeover attempt. I have done things that people twice my age, and with 10 times my resources, said I couldn't do. And you have never, not once, looked at any of it and said you were proud of me without immediately following it with a reason why it wasn't quite enough." The room had gone quieter around them. People were pretending not to listen in the way that made clear they were listening to everything. Margaret said nothing. "So I am telling you now," Victoria continued, and her voice did not shake, but Nathan could feel standing beside her the specific cost of keeping it steady. "That I am here. I am at my sister's wedding. I am standing here, and I am not going to apologize for anything about who I am, or who I brought with me, or what I feel about either. And if you would like to have a real conversation, not a strategic one, not a managed one, a real one, I am available for that. I have always been available for that. You just have to actually want it." She stopped talking. The room breathed. Margaret looked at her daughter. Something moved across her face, complicated, layered, the expression of a woman confronting something she had not prepared for. Then she straightened. She put on a small, closed smile. "You've always been very direct," she said, which was not a response, and both of them knew it. She looked at Nathan one more time. Then she turned and walked back into the larger group. Victoria watched her go. Nathan waited. After a moment, she said quietly, and without looking at him, "I need some air." "I know." He turned toward the terrace door. "Come on." They stood outside in the same place he had stood with Alexander Reed an hour ago, in a conversation that felt like it belonged to a different continent. The night was cool. The salt was still in the air. Victoria had her arms crossed over her chest, not in a defensive way, but in the way of someone who was holding themselves together by main force and had decided that was acceptable. "She's not going to change," Victoria said. It wasn't a sad statement. It was a statement about physics. "Probably not," Nathan agreed. "I know that." She looked at the water. "I've known that for years. Knowing it doesn't make it—" She stopped. "It doesn't make it not hurt," Nathan said. She was quiet for a moment. "No, it doesn't make it not hurt." Another pause. "When you were growing up, your family, were they—" "My father was military," Nathan said. "My mother worked 2 jobs. They weren't complicated people. They were clear. They said what they meant. I never had to wonder where I stood with them." He paused. "I know that's not everyone's experience." "I used to wonder what that was like." Her voice was careful, not pitying herself, just observing. "To know where you stood. I made myself stop wondering because it felt like a waste of energy. You work with what you have." "You do," he said. She looked at him. In the low light from the windows behind them, she looked different from how she looked in the office, less managed somehow, more present. "Can I ask you something honestly? You can always ask me honestly. Do you think—" She stopped again. Started again. "When you look at me, not the CEO, not the client, when you look at me, the actual person, what do you see?" Nathan thought about this the way he thought about things that deserved a real answer. Not the quick answer, the true one. "I see someone who built everything she has from scratch because nobody was going to hand it to her," he said. "Someone who is incredibly capable and knows it and doesn't need to be told. Someone who works so hard at being unbreakable that she sometimes forgets she's allowed to be tired." He held her gaze. "And I see someone who, when she calls me in the middle of a workday to say she needs someone in her corner, is asking for the first time in a long time to not be alone in a room." Victoria looked at him. She didn't say anything for a moment. I shouldn't have asked you here like this, she said finally. Under these pretenses, it wasn't fair to you. You asked me honestly, he said. You told me I could say no. You told me what you needed and why. That's not unfair. A pause. Victoria, look at me. She looked at him. I'm not here because I didn't have another choice. I'm not here because I was maneuvered into it. I'm here because when you called me and your voice sounded the way it sounded, I wanted to be in your corner. He said it plainly because plain was the only way he knew how to say important things. That's the whole truth of it, whatever that means going forward. The night was quiet around them. Inside, the sound of the gathering moved on without them voices and music and the specific energy of a room full of people performing. Out here, there was just the sound of water and two people standing close enough that it would have taken very little for one of them to reach out. Neither of them did, but neither of them stepped back either. I owe you an honest answer to something, Victoria said. You don't owe me anything. No, I want to. She uncrossed her arms, let them fall to her sides. A small gesture, but Nathan understood what it cost her, this woman for whom every posture and position was managed. What I told my mother, that what we were was professional, that you were a contact. She paused. That wasn't true. He waited. It hasn't been just professional for a while, she said. For my part anyway. I don't know, I can't speak for... She stopped. Victoria, he said. What? I drove a truck with bad tires to an airport to get on a plane to spend a weekend with a woman. I could have cited professional boundaries and stayed home. I think you can speak for both of us. She looked at him. And then something that Nathan had seen glimpses of, small moments over 8 months, brief windows that she almost immediately closed. She actually smiled. Not the managed version, not the professional version, the real one, the one that changed her entire face. It hit him somewhere in his chest, the way things that were true always did. This is going to be complicated, she said. It already is, he said. I'm not easy to be around. I know. I work constantly. I'm bad at receiving things, care and those kinds of things. I noticed. And you have Marcus, and your life is built around Victoria. What? I know what I'm doing, he said quietly. Give me some credit. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, okay. Just that. Okay. But the way she said it, like something that had been pulled very tight, finally letting go, like a held breath released, was worth more than any speech either of them could have made. They stood there for a while longer. Not talking, not performing. Just standing in the same place, in the same night air, in the particular quiet that existed between two people who had just told each other the truth. Inside the house behind them, Alexander Reed was somewhere finding a new angle. Margaret Hayes was somewhere recalibrating. The family was somewhere performing its various versions of itself. Out here, Nathan thought about Marcus asleep at Denise's apartment, probably with the submarine book half open on the pillow beside him. He thought about 4:45 in the morning and breakfast, and the small particular weight of an ordinary life lived on purpose. I thought about the fact that Carla, if she were here, and he knew this about her, had known it from their very first year together, would have liked Victoria Hayes enormously. Would have seen through the armor to the person underneath in about 30 seconds, and would have been completely direct about it, which was the thing Carla did to people that made them uncomfortable, and then grateful. He thought about what Marcus had said in the bathroom. I wouldn't be weird about it. He looked at the water. Beside him, Victoria Hayes, the most powerful woman in any room she had ever walked into, stood quietly, arms at her sides, not managing anything, not performing anything, just breathing the same night air he was breathing. It was the closest thing to ordinary she probably ever got. And it was enough. Tomorrow was the wedding. Tomorrow, the family would reassemble with all its expectations and alliances, and the particular warfare of people who loved each other badly. Tomorrow, there would be Alexander Reed and Margaret Hayes and all the rest of it. Tonight there was just this. Nathan was a man who had learned to be grateful for what a given moment actually contained, instead of what he wished it contained. It was maybe the most important thing 11 years in the Navy had taught him. Not discipline. Not tactics. Just this. The ability to look at what was actually in front of you and see it clearly and decide it was enough. What was in front of him was enough. He turned toward the door. "We should go back in." Victoria nodded. She straightened her jacket, pulled herself back into the version of herself that the room required. But something about the way she did it was different from the way she had done it earlier. Less armored, like she was choosing it now instead of hiding behind it. She went through the door first. Nathan followed, and as he walked back into the noise and light of the room, he felt with the clarity that only came when something was true, that whatever happened next, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. He slept 4 hours. That was normal for Nathan. His body had been calibrated by years of watch schedules and deployments to function on whatever sleep was available, to close down completely for a few hours, and then come back online like a system that had been briefly powered off. He was awake at 4:45 out of pure muscle memory, in a guest room that was larger than his entire apartment, and he lay in the dark for a moment and listened to the house. Big houses made different sounds than small ones. More settling. More distance between rooms. The silence had more space in it. He got up, found his phone, and saw a message from Marcus sent at 9:30 the previous night. "Dad, Aunt Denise let me have 2 pieces of cake. Don't tell her I told you. Also, I finished the submarine book again. Can we get the next one? Love, Marcus." Nathan read it twice. The formal sign-off. Love, Marcus was something his son had started doing about 6 months ago. Unprompted, the way kids sometimes formalized things they were serious about. It hit him the same way every time. He typed back, "2 pieces of cake is 1 too many. Don't negotiate with Aunt Denise, she always wins. Yes, we can get the next book. Love, Dad." He set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed and thought about the night before. What Victoria had said on the terrace. What he had said back. The way she had looked at him after not searching, not calculating. Just looking the way you looked at something when you had stopped trying to figure out what it was and had decided to simply accept that it existed. He thought about Carla. He did this sometimes, not with grief, not anymore, but with a kind of honesty he felt he owed her. He would think about her directly, would put her clearly in front of him in his mind, and ask himself whether the thing he was doing would have made sense to her. Whether it would have made sense to the man he had been when she was alive, and whether it made sense to the man he was now, and whether those 2 men were close enough to each other that the answer could be the same. Carla had always told him, "You don't let yourself want things, Nathan. You do things. You take care of things. But wanting, you treat that like it's something you have to earn first." He hadn't argued with her then. He didn't argue with her now, 3 years after, in a dark guest room that smelled like expensive linens. He got up, got dressed, and went to find coffee. The kitchen was large and empty, and the coffee maker was the kind that required a brief education, but he worked it out in a few minutes and stood at the counter while it ran and looked out the window at the early light coming across the water. The wedding was today. Sophie and her fiancé Daniel would be married at 2 in the afternoon in the garden, and by tonight the whole production would be over, and Nathan would be on a plane back to his truck and his apartment and Marcus's submarine books. I thought about that. The returning. The ordinary texture of his life waiting on the other side of this weekend. He thought about how much he didn't want to lose what had happened on that terrace to the simple fact of the weekend ending. "You're up early." He turned. Sophie stood in the kitchen doorway, in a robe, her hair down, looking nothing like the composed version of herself from the night before, and entirely like a woman who was getting married in 6 hours and had maybe slept 3 of the last 12. "Always am," Nathan said. "Coffee?" "God, yes." He poured her a cup. She took it with both hands and sat at the kitchen island and looked at him over the rim. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "Terrified." She said it simply, without drama. "Not about Daniel. Daniel is the best decision I have ever made. I'm terrified about everything around the decision. The day. The people. My mother." She drank the coffee. "Is that normal?" "I wasn't great the morning of my wedding," Nathan said. "But I also got married at a courthouse with a paper cup of champagne, so the stakes were different." Sophie smiled. "Victoria told me about that. She said when you mentioned it, it was the first time she'd heard something that sounded like an actual marriage instead of a transaction. Nathan looked at her. She said that last month, on the phone. Sophie wrapped her hands around the mug. We talk more than people know. She's not as closed off as she performs. She just reserves herself for safe places. A pause. I think you're a safe place for her. I think that's new. Nathan didn't respond to that. He poured himself more coffee. She told our mother you were a professional contact, Sophie said. She didn't tell me that. She told me she'd met someone who didn't want anything from her, and that she didn't know what to do with it. He looked at the counter for a moment, then he looked up. Sophie, today is your wedding day. Yes. I don't want to spend it talking about me and your sister. You're not. I am. You're just standing there drinking coffee. She smiled, and it was warm and at the same time, the family resemblance to Victoria. He was starting to understand, lived not in their features, but in that quality of being two things simultaneously. I just want you to know whatever happens this weekend, whatever form this takes, I'm glad she has you. Even if she's never said that directly. Even if she's performed her way through the entire 48 hours. She set the mug down. She needs someone who doesn't keep score. I don't keep score, Nathan said. I know. She stood, pulled the robe tighter. That's exactly what I mean. She took her coffee and went back upstairs. Nathan stood alone in the kitchen and thought that Victoria Hayes had a sister who understood her completely and loved her anyway, and that was not a small thing, even if it felt invisible most of the time from inside all the family noise. He refilled his cup and went to sit somewhere quiet before the day started. He didn't get long. By 9 in the morning, the house had a different quality of movement. The easy looseness of early morning was gone, replaced by the particular forward pressure of an event that was going to happen at a specific time, whether or not everyone was ready. Florists. A coordinator with a headset who spoke into it with the intensity of someone directing an air traffic operation. Family members appearing in various states of preparation, some of them already dressed, some of them trailing coffee and mild panic. Nathan was in the sitting room near the back of the house, jacket off, reviewing something on his phone, when Victoria appeared. She was dressed. Dark green something fitted her hair down in a way he hadn't seen before, not the controlled version, not the professional version. She stopped when she saw him, and for just a moment before she managed it, he saw the flicker of something on her face, something like relief. You're up, she said. Been up for a while. She sat down across from him. She looked like she'd slept better than he expected, or like she was very good at looking like she had, which was also possible. My mother came to my room this morning, she said. He waited. She sat on the edge of the bed, which she has not done since I was about 12, and she said, I looked him up, meaning you. Victoria looked at him steadily. She found your record, your commendations. She found the article from 2019 about the rescue operation off the coast of Japan. She read about Carla. Nathan was still. She didn't apologize, Victoria said. My mother doesn't have that vocabulary, but she said, she paused, and he could see her choosing the exact words the way she always chose exact words. She said, he seems like a man who keeps his word, and then she left. The room was quiet. That's high praise, Victoria said. From her. I want you to know that. I understand, Nathan said. I'm not sure you do. My mother has never in my adult life said anything positive about a choice I made in my personal life without a qualification attached to it. She looked at her hands briefly. She said it without a qualification. Nathan thought about the woman in the ivory dress from the night before, with the practiced smile and the geometric emotional distance, and tried to square that with a woman who had gone to her daughter's room in the morning and sat on the edge of the bed. He found he could do it. People were almost always more complicated than the version of themselves they deployed in public. Does it change anything? He asked. For you, Victoria considered. It changes something small, some specific ache I've been carrying for a long time. She looked at him. It doesn't change what I said to you last night. I didn't think it did. I just wanted to be clear. Victoria, you're always clear. It's one of my favorite things about you. She looked at him with an expression he was starting to recognize, the one that appeared when he said something she hadn't prepared a response for, when he got past the managed exterior to the actual person underneath, who was not always sure what to do with direct kindness. Before she could say anything, Margaret Hayes appeared in the doorway. She looked at Nathan, then at Victoria, then at Nathan again. Something moved across her face that wasn't quite the smile from the night before. Something slightly more honest than that. Slightly more uncomfortable. The expression of a woman doing something that didn't come easily to her. "Petty Officer Walker," she said. "Good morning?" "Good morning, ma'am." A pause. She looked at him with the particular focus of someone revising an assessment. "I understand you served in the Pacific Fleet." "Among other assignments, yes. My husband served in the Air Force, before he passed." She said it without inflection, which was somehow more revealing than if she'd said it with sadness. "He would have—" She stopped, recalibrated. "I hope you enjoy the ceremony today." She looked at her daughter. "Sophie is asking for you." Then she was gone. Victoria looked at the doorway she had left through. "That," she said quietly, "is as close to an olive branch as that woman has ever extended in my direction." "Take it," Nathan said. She looked at him. "What?" "Whatever form it comes in, take it." He held her gaze. "Life is short, Victoria. You know that. I know you know that." She was quiet for a moment. Then she stood. "I need to go see Sophie." She started toward the door and then stopped and turned back. "Nathan?" "Yeah, last night." She paused, and he could see her deciding how direct to be landing on completely. "I meant what I said. I want you to know that the morning hasn't changed it." "I know. You keep saying that." "Because I keep believing it." She looked at him for one more second. Then she went to find her sister. The wedding ceremony was at 2. Nathan stood with the guests to the side in the precise position he had calibrated to be present without being conspicuous. A skill acquired through years of situations where his job was to be in a room without being the story. He watched Sophie walk toward Daniel and saw the moment Daniel's face changed when he saw her, that specific, unmanaged thing that happened to a person's face when they were looking at the person they loved, walking toward them. And Nathan felt it in his chest, the way he always felt true things. He thought about his own courthouse, the paper cup, Carla's laugh. He thought about how fast it went, how you stood in a moment thinking you had so many more of them. And then one day you were standing somewhere else, looking back at it, and understanding that you had been exactly right. You'd had so many more, but also that every single one of them was irreplaceable and gone. He didn't let himself stay in that for long. He looked over and found Victoria across the gathered guests watching her sister. Victoria's face was open in a way he almost never saw it. The management was down fully for just this moment. She looked like someone who loved her sister very much and was happy for her, and was also quietly feeling the particular loneliness of watching the people you love find the thing you haven't found yet. Then she turned her head slightly and found him watching her. I didn't look away. Neither did she. Something passed between them across that distance. No words, no gesture, nothing that anyone else in that gathering would have noticed. Just the acknowledgement. Just, I see you. I know what you're feeling. You are not as alone in it as you think. She turned back to the ceremony. Nathan turned back to the ceremony. Sophie and Daniel said their vows in plain language without performance, and it was exactly right. The reception was where Alexander Reed made his move. Nathan had been expecting it. The timing was almost predictable. Reed was a man who operated with strategy, who identified optimal moments, the way a chess player identified board positions, and the optimal moment for what he intended was going to be after the ceremony, after the first round of drinks, when the social lubricant was flowing, and the emotional temperature of the room was at its highest, and everyone's guard was at its most relaxed. Nathan was standing near the edge of the reception space talking to Charles, who had over the course of the weekend become the one person in this family he genuinely liked when he saw Reed cross the room toward Victoria. Victoria was talking to a couple. Nathan didn't recognize doing the professional networking thing that probably happened automatically for her at any social event. She had her glass of champagne, her composed face, her ability to give anyone she was talking to the impression of her complete attention. She didn't see Reed coming. Nathan said, "Excuse me," to Charles and moved. He reached Victoria's side about 4 seconds before Reed did, coming up from the other direction close enough that when he arrived, he could simply, without any drama, without any announcement, put his hand lightly at the small of her back in the way that meant, "I'm here. I see what's happening." He felt her register it, a small adjustment in her posture, an awareness. Then Reed was there. "Victoria." Reed's voice was smooth and social and entirely calculated. He looked at the couple she'd been talking to and gave them his best smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting." He looked at Nathan. "Walker." Reed. The couple found a reason to drift away. People always found a reason to drift away from specific social tensions. It was a human instinct, and then it was the three of them. "Beautiful ceremony," Reed said. "It was," Victoria said. "Sophie looks happy." "She is." Reed smiled. He was very good at this. The surface of the conversation was entirely pleasant and entirely controlled, and underneath it was a structure that was moving towards something specific. Nathan stood beside Victoria and waited for it. "I was hoping we might find a moment to talk," Reed said. "Just briefly. There are some things I've been wanting to say." His eyes moved to Nathan in a way that was meant to suggest Nathan was the obstacle to a private conversation. Victoria didn't move. "Whatever you want to say, you can say." A pause. Reed absorbed this, recalibrated. "All right." He looked at Nathan first, then at Victoria. "I made mistakes. With us. I know that. And I'm not here to excuse them. I'm here because I've spent 2 years understanding what I lost and what I should have done differently." He said it with the specific quality of a prepared speech that was designed to sound unprepared. "I think we had something real, Victoria. Underneath all the complexity. I think that's worth examining." Victoria was quiet. Nathan could feel her beside him, and he knew the way you knew things about people after enough time, that she was not moved by this in the way Reed intended. She was moved by something else. By the particular exhaustion of a man who had genuinely hurt her, now returning with the language of growth to try again. She was going to be civil. She was going to be managed. She was going to handle this the way she handled everything, cleanly, with precision, without unnecessary damage. And then something different happened. Nathan spoke. "Can I ask you something?" Nathan said to Reed. His voice was conversational, easy. "When you reached out to Margaret, was that before or after you found out Victoria was bringing someone?" Reed looked at him. The pleasant surface shifted slightly. "I'm not sure that's relevant." "You reached out to Margaret 3 months ago," Victoria said. Her voice had changed. "I know that. What I didn't know." She paused, and Nathan could see her arriving at something in real time. Was the timing. Nathan looked at Reed steadily. "Because if it was before, that's one thing. If it was after, if someone told you she was bringing someone and you called Margaret to get yourself inside this weekend, that's a different thing entirely." Reed's face did something complicated. Just briefly. Just enough. It was after. Victoria saw it. Nathan saw it. The truth of it sat in the room between all three of them, solid and undeniable. "You should go enjoy the reception, Alexander," Victoria said. Her voice was entirely even. "There's really nothing here for you." Reed looked at her. For just a moment, the strategy was completely gone from his face, and what was underneath it was something rawer, something that might have been in a different version of this man genuine. But then it was managed back, covered, put away. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said. To Victoria, but looking at Nathan. "I do," she said. He walked away. Victoria stood very still for a moment. Then she took a deliberate sip of her champagne. Nathan stood beside her and said nothing, because nothing needed to be said. After a moment, she said, "How did you know about the timing?" "I didn't," Nathan said. "But he did." She looked at him. "You were reading him." "I was reading him." She was quiet for another moment. "Thank you. You didn't need me for that. You were handling it." "I know." A pause. "I still wanted you there." He looked at her. "I know." The reception moved around them. Somewhere nearby, Sophie and Daniel were dancing, and people were taking photographs, and the particular beautiful noise of a celebration was filling the space. Margaret Hayes was across the room, and she looked over once at Victoria and gave her daughter something that was almost not quite, but almost a nod. Victoria saw it. Nathan saw her see it. "Small things," he said quietly. "Small things," she agreed. It was Charles who caused the rupture. Not maliciously. Charles was not a malicious man. He was simply old enough and had drunk enough good wine to have lost interest in the performance of social convention, and he said what he thought, and what he thought came out at the wrong moment, in exactly the right way to turn a private truth into a public one. I was talking to a group of family members. Nathan could see this happening from across the room, could see the shape of it, but not hear the words yet, and he was animated in the way people got when they were telling a story they found genuinely compelling. He gestured. He laughed. The group around him leaned in. Then Nathan heard Margaret Hayes standing near the group say, "I'm sorry, what did you say?" Her voice. Charles looked up mildly surprised. "I said they've been well, I assumed everyone knew. Victoria and her young man. She mentioned they'd been seeing each other for months. I assumed that was the open secret of the weekend." The group went quiet. Margaret looked across the room at Victoria. Victoria went very still. Nathan, watching this from 30 feet away, understood in real time exactly what was happening. The thing that Victoria had carefully managed the story, that he was a professional contact. That this was a practical arrangement for the weekend had just been removed from her control entirely. The actual truth, which she had told only Sophie, and which had somehow reached Charles through whatever family communication network existed, was now in the middle of the room. He looked at Victoria. She was looking at her mother. Margaret Hayes walked across the reception space toward her daughter with the specific energy of a woman who had just had the ground shifted under her and was recalibrating in motion. She stopped in front of Victoria. The room had that quality, not silent, but listening. The way rooms got when something real was happening. "Months," Margaret said. Not a question. Victoria didn't flinch. "Yes." "And you told me he was—" "I told you what I thought you could handle," Victoria said. "Which I know is not the same as the truth. I know that. I'm not proud of it." Margaret looked at Nathan, who had crossed the room and was standing at Victoria's side again, because that was where he was going to be. Margaret looked at him for a long time. Then she looked back at her daughter. "You were afraid I would do exactly what I did," Margaret said, "before you gave me the chance to do otherwise." The room was listening now without pretending not to. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. Then, with a kind of honesty that Nathan suspected cost her more than anything else she'd done all weekend. "Yes, I was afraid of that." Margaret was very still. Nathan watched her face and saw working through it something that was not anger. He had expected anger, had prepared for it, but something harder to read than that. Something that looked like recognition. Like a woman seeing for possibly the first time clearly the mechanism of a relationship she had built without understanding what it was building. "I have made you afraid of me," Margaret said. She said it like a fact, like the result of an equation she had just finished solving. "That is not what I intended." "I know," Victoria said. "Mom, let me finish." Margaret's voice was not loud. It was controlled, but a different kind of controlled, not performed control, but the control of someone holding something fragile. "I have spent 40 years believing that the correct expression of love was preparation. That if I prepared you well enough, pushed you hard enough, held you to high enough standards, you would be ready for anything. That the world would not be able to hurt you." She paused. "I have not considered until this moment that I might have been one of the things you needed to be ready for." The room was completely still. Nathan looked at Margaret Hayes. Really looked at her, the way he looked at things he wanted to understand, and saw what was under the ivory dress, and the geometric smile, and the 30 years of social management. He saw a woman who loved her daughters in the only way she had ever been taught, which was an insufficient way, and who was standing in the middle of her younger daughter's wedding reception, having this particular conversation, which told him that underneath everything else, she was still capable of something real. Victoria's eyes were bright. She was not going to cry. Nathan knew that could feel it, but the brightness was there, the pressure of something that had been waiting a long time to be said. "I just wanted you to say you were proud of me," Victoria said. Her voice was steady. Once, without the next part, without the qualifier, just that you were proud. Margaret looked at her daughter. "I am proud of you," she said. "Every day, in every way that matters." She paused. "I am sorry it took this long to say it plainly." Victoria didn't move for a moment. Then she did something Nathan had never seen her do, had not expected to see her do in a room full of people in this particular family context after this particular weekend. She reached out and put her hand over her mother's hand. Margaret looked down at it. Then she covered it with her other hand. The room breathed. Nathan looked away. Not because it wasn't his moment. It wasn't, but that wasn't why. He looked away because there were things that deserved their privacy, even in public, and this was one of them, and it wasn't his job right now to witness it, but to give it space. He found himself standing near Charles, who had watched all of this unfold, with the expression of a man who had not expected to cause a scene, but was privately not sorry about the outcome. "That," Charles said quietly, "has needed to happen for about 15 years. "Probably longer," Nathan said. "You're good for her." Charles looked at him. "Victoria, you're good for her." Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I don't know yet what I am for her. We're still figuring it out." "That's the right answer," Charles said. "People who know exactly what they are for each other before they've done the work usually have it wrong." He raised his glass. "To the work." Nathan raised his coffee cup. He'd switched to coffee an hour ago. "To the work." Alexander Reed left the reception early. Nathan saw him go. A brief departure contained no drama, the exit of a man who had concluded that the board position he'd calculated was no longer available and had decided to cut his losses cleanly. Nathan watched him go without satisfaction and without guilt. He had not done anything to Reed that Reed had not done to himself. Sometimes situations resolved that way. Sophie found Nathan on the edge of the dancing later in the evening. She was flushed and happy and had her shoes in her hand because she'd been dancing for an hour and had decided somewhere in the middle of it that shoes were optional. "I hear my family provided excellent entertainment today," she said. "Your family provided your family," Nathan said. "I think that's entertainment enough." She laughed. "Where's Victoria?" He nodded toward the far side of the space where Victoria was sitting with Margaret. Just the two of them. Talking. Not performing, not managing talking. Nathan had checked on them once from a distance and had seen Margaret laughing at something Victoria said, and had turned around and gone back to where he'd been. Sophie looked at them for a moment. Her expression was complicated and warm, and a little undone in the way people got at weddings when things that were supposed to happen finally happened. "My dad would have loved you," she said. "He was military, Navy actually. That was why she looked you up, I think. When Mom said she looked you up, I think she was looking for him a little bit." Nathan didn't say anything. He thought about the article about her late father that he'd never looked for, but that apparently existed somewhere, and about the way Margaret had said my husband served that morning, and about how the things that shaped people were so rarely the things that were visible. "Take care of her," Sophie said. "She'll tell you she doesn't need it. She does." "I know. And she'll take care of you too. She's not good at showing it yet, but she will be." She looked at him. "She already is in her way. You probably see it." "I see it," Nathan said. Sophie nodded, satisfied. Then she put her shoes back on, squared her shoulders, and went back to her wedding reception with the energy of a woman who was going to enjoy every remaining minute of this night. Nathan stood where he was for a moment. Then he took out his phone. "Hey Marcus," he typed, still awake. 3 minutes passed. Then, "Dad, it is midnight." "I know. Sorry. Go back to sleep. Are you okay?" He looked across the room at Victoria, who was still talking to her mother, and at the very specific quality of the conversation happening between them, careful and real and overdue. And he thought about his son asking that question, this 7-year-old, who carried enough awareness to ask it even at midnight when he was supposed to be asleep. "Yeah, buddy," he typed back. "I'm really good. Go to sleep." "Okay. Love, Marcus." He smiled at his phone in a way he didn't manage or control or think about. "Love, Dad," he typed and put the phone back in his pocket, across the room. Victoria said something to her mother, and her mother touched her daughter's face, a small gesture. Brief, the kind of thing that meant everything in context. And then Victoria looked up and across the room and found Nathan, and the expression on her face was something he had not seen on her before in 8 months of knowing her. She looked not happy exactly, though she was that too. She looked like someone who had put down something very heavy that she had been carrying for a very long time. She raised her champagne glass slightly. Just a fraction. He raised his coffee cup back. She almost laughed. He could see it even from across the room. He thought, whatever this is, it is real. Whatever comes next, this part was real. He thought, that is enough to start with. The music had shifted to something slower, and people were moving. And somewhere in the room, Sophie was dancing with Daniel in the uncomplicated way of two people who had made the right decision and knew it. And the night moved forward the way nights did, without asking anyone's permission, without waiting for anyone to be ready. Nathan Walker stood at the edge of it all and felt for the first time in a long time that he was not simply holding things together. How was somewhere he actually wanted to be. The flight home was quieter than the flight out. Not uncomfortably quiet. The kind of quiet that exists between two people who have said enough real things to each other that silence no longer feels like a gap that needs to be filled. Victoria had her tablet again, but she wasn't looking at it. It sat on the table between them, screen dark, and she looked out the window at the country moving below them, and Nathan sat across from her and drank his coffee and let the quiet be what it was. They were about 40 minutes out when she spoke. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "Okay. When you go back Monday, to the base, to the liaison office." She looked at him. "What happens to this, whatever this is? What does it look like inside a professional arrangement?" Nathan had been thinking about this too. He'd been thinking about it since somewhere over Nevada. It looks like two people being honest about what's happening and deciding together how to handle it, the way adults do. The Navy has regulations about personal relationships in professional contexts. I know the regulations. And the liaison arrangement has a scheduled review at the end of the month, he said. If we determine at that review that the arrangement needs to change, that having me in that building is no longer the right operational structure, then we make that case, and the Navy reassigns me. It's not complicated. She looked at him. You would do that request reassignment? If that's what the situation requires, yes. That could affect your career. Victoria. He set down his coffee. I've spent 11 years making decisions based on what the mission requires. The mission right now isn't the liaison assignment. He held her gaze. Do you understand what I'm saying? She was quiet for a moment. You're saying I'm the mission. I'm saying Marcus is the mission. And some things related to Marcus are the mission, and I'm starting to think you might be one of those things. He said it plainly without decoration, because that was the only way he knew how to say important things. But I need you to be honest with me about whether that's what you want. Not what's convenient, not what's logistically workable, what you actually want. Victoria looked at him across the small table on the private plane, with the country 30,000 feet below them and the cabin completely quiet around them. I want to have breakfast with you, she said. Not a business breakfast, not a briefing. Breakfast. With you and Marcus in your apartment where you make too much food, and he reads at the table and you pretend to be annoyed by it. She paused. I want that. I've wanted it for longer than I've been willing to say. Nathan looked at her. That's a very specific thing to want. I'm a specific person. You are. He picked up his coffee again. Saturday after next, you come to the apartment. 7:30. I make breakfast. You meet Marcus properly. She blinked. Just like that. Just like that. Nathan, I run a $2 billion company. I manage 1,200 employees. I have negotiated contracts with the Department of Defense. I don't know how to... She stopped. I don't know how to just come to someone's apartment at 7:30 in the morning. Yes, you do, he said. You just haven't done it in a while. He looked at her steadily. Show up. That's the whole instruction. Everything else takes care of itself. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her face moved through several things. Quickly doubt calculation, the familiar reflex to manage and qualify and protect, and then on the other side of all of it, landed somewhere clearer. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She picked up the tablet. He could see she still wasn't looking at it, but she needed somewhere to put her hands, so he let her have it. Outside, the clouds moved past below them, and the country kept on being itself, and Nathan Walker finished his coffee and thought about Saturday after next. He picked up Marcus on Sunday evening. Denise met him at the door with the expression of someone who had been waiting 36 hours to have a specific conversation and was going to have it whether or not Nathan was ready. "Inside," she said. "Marcus is in the backyard." "Denise, inside Nathan." He went inside. He sat at her kitchen table. She sat across from him and folded her hands the way Carla used to do when she was being patient on purpose, and he felt the familiar specific ache of that, not grief, just the echo of it, the shape it left behind. "Tell me," Denise said. He told her. Not everything. He was not a man who told everything, but the important parts. The terrace conversation, the reception, Margaret, what Victoria had said on the plane, Saturday after next. Denise listened without interrupting, which was how he knew she understood the weight of it. When she interrupted, it meant she thought something was simple. When she listened completely, it meant she knew it wasn't. When he was done, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How does it feel?" He thought about it honestly. "Terrifying," he said, "and right, both at the same time, oath. That's what right usually feels like." She looked at him across the table. "Nathan, Carla has been gone for 3 years. You have been holding everything together for 3 years, the job, Marcus, the apartment, every single piece of it alone, by yourself, on purpose, because you decided somewhere along the way that needing someone was the same as failing at something." She held his gaze. "It is not the same thing." He didn't argue. "Marcus told me something while you were gone," she said. "He told me that he asked you before you left if you'd be weird if you liked someone. And he said you looked at him the way you look at him when something he says is true, but you don't want to deal with it yet." Nathan was quiet. "He's 7, Denise said. "And he already knows you better than you know yourself, which means you raised him right, but it also means you're not as hidden as you think you are." She stood and went to the window and called out, "Marcus, your dad's here." The back door burst open. Marcus came through it at the specific velocity of a small person who had been outside for 2 hours and was now reporting back to home base. He had grass on his knees and something that might have been chocolate on his chin, and a look of complete satisfaction with his own existence. He stopped when he saw his father. Looked at him. Assessed the way he always did this kid who had been reading people since he was old enough to understand that people were worth reading. "You look different," Marcus said. "I just got back from a trip." "No." Marcus tilted his head. "You look different from before the trip, too." He considered this with the gravity of a scientist examining data. "Did something happen?" Nathan looked at his son. At Carla's eyes in this 7-year-old face that was also increasingly his own face, the jaw, the way he stood, the particular quality of his attention. He thought about what to say, how to say it. What was the right amount of truth for this conversation? Then he thought about what he always told Marcus about truth: say what's real, even when it's complicated. Especially then. "Something happened," Nathan said. "Something good. I'll tell you more about it later when I understand it better myself." Marcus nodded, serious. "Okay." Then, because he was 7, "Did Aunt Denise tell you about the cake?" "She did not," Nathan said, looking at Denise, who was looking at the ceiling. "Tell me about the cake." The Monday morning debriefing with his supervisor, Commander Elise Rourke, was at 8 o'clock at the base. Rourke was a compact woman with sharp eyes and 20 years in the Navy, and she had a specific quality of attention that Nathan had always respected. She listened for what wasn't being said as much as what was. She'd been his supervisor for 2 of his 11 years, and she knew him well enough to read the spaces between his sentences. Hai went in, sat down, and gave her the professional version of the weekend, the security context, the presence of Reed as a potential complicating factor in Victoria's personal orbit, the family dynamics, as they related to the company's leadership stability. He was thorough and precise and completely professional. When he was done, Rourke looked at him for a moment. "And the personal situation," she said. He kept his face neutral. "The personal situation. Nathan, I have known you for 2 years. You walked in here looking like a man who has made a decision. In my experience, the only thing that makes a man look like that is either a major career move or a woman. Since you haven't mentioned a career move, I need to talk to you about the liaison arrangement," he said. "There it is." He looked at her directly. "I need to tell you that the professional context of this assignment has become complicated in a way that I don't think serves the mission. I'm not saying anything happened that was inappropriate. I'm saying that the arrangement—" "You're in love with her," Rourke said. The room was quiet. "I'm developing," he started. "Nathan." He stopped, looked at his supervisor. Then, because she was right, and he was a man who said what was real, yes. Rourke sat back in her chair. She had the expression of someone who was not surprised, but was taking a moment to process the implications. "How long?" "I don't know exactly. Several months. It wasn't a decision I made. It was a thing I noticed." "And she—" "Yes." Rourke was quiet for a moment. "You understand that I have to document this conversation." "I know." "And that the liaison arrangement will need to be reviewed." "I know that too. That's why I'm telling you." She looked at him steadily. "You could have not told me. You could have managed this quietly. A lot of people would have." "I know," he said again. "Why didn't you—" He thought about it. "Because keeping things quiet is how things go wrong," he said. "I've seen it. You keep something quiet because it's easier in the short term, and then it compounds, and by the time it surfaces, it's bigger and messier than it needed to be. I'd rather have the hard conversation early." Rourke studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded once definitively. "End of month review. We'll assess the arrangement then. In the meantime, you continue in your role, you behave professionally, and you don't make any decisions about the assignment unilaterally. Understood? And Nathan—" She waited until he looked at her. "She's a serious person. I've met her twice, at the Defense Procurement Summit last year and at the Joint Technology Briefing in March. She's serious in the way that matters not performed seriousness, but actual moral weight." She paused. "You're both serious people. That's not the worst foundation." He stood. "Thank you, Commander." "Don't thank me. Go do your job." He went and did his job. The week was ordinary on the surface. He was in the office every morning. He reviewed assessments. He attended briefings. He sat across from Victoria in the conference room on Tuesday afternoon for a scheduled debrief, and they were both completely professional because they were both people who could do that, who could hold two things at once without letting them collapse into each other. But after the debrief, when the other people in the room had filtered out, Victoria looked at him across the table and said, "Are you all right?" "I talked to my supervisor," he said. She went still. "About the arrangement." "About the arrangement." She looked at him. He could see her reading it, reading his face, his posture, the information he was giving her. What did she say? "End of month review. Everything professional in the meantime." She was fair about it. Victoria was quiet. "I don't want to cost you something professionally," she said. "I mean that." "You're not costing me anything," he said. "I'm making choices. There's a difference." "Nathan." "Victoria, look at me." He held her gaze. "I have spent 11 years making sacrifices that I didn't think of as sacrifices because they were for something that mattered. I know the difference between giving something up and giving something away. This is not giving something away." He paused. "Let me make my own choices." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she exhaled a small, controlled thing, a fraction of the exhale it probably was inside. "Okay. Saturday after next," he said. "Saturday after next," she agreed. She gathered her things and left. Nathan sat at the conference table for a moment alone in the quiet room and thought about what Rourke had said. "She's serious in the way that matters. I thought about that. about what it meant to have two serious people occupying the same space, both of them. People who had been running on their own for a long time. Both of them people who had learned to carry weight without complaining about it. He thought about whether that was a foundation or a collision course, and he concluded honestly that it was probably both, and that was fine. The things worth having were usually both. He went back to work. Thursday evening, he got the call from Captain Morrison. Morrison was not Nathan's direct supervisor. He was 3 levels above Rourke, which meant that when Morrison called it, meant something had moved up a chain faster than expected. Nathan was in his apartment helping Marcus with math homework. Marcus had a specific relationship with fractions that was adversarial in nature when his phone rang. He looked at the number, felt the shift in his stomach that happened when something important arrived. "Give me 5 minutes," he told Marcus and went to the kitchen. "Walker," Morrison said. "I'll be direct. Rourke filed her documentation from your Monday conversation. It came across my desk this afternoon because of the nature of the company involved. Hayes Defense Technologies is a significant contracting partner, and any complications in the liaison arrangement are flagged at my level." A pause. "I'm also calling because there's a separate matter. An opportunity." Nathan waited. Southeast Asia attachment. 6 months, starting in 90 days. It's a significant posting, career-defining, frankly. Senior liaison role with a joint task force. The kind of assignment that opens doors for the next 10 years. Morrison paused. Given the current situation with the Hayes arrangement, it might be a natural transition point. Clean. Everyone moves forward without complication. The kitchen was very quiet. Through the wall, Nathan could hear Marcus at the table, could hear the small sounds of a 7-year-old trying to understand fractions. "Can I ask who identified me for this?" Nathan said. "You came up through the regular evaluation process." "I understand that, but someone specifically pulled my name in the context of this conversation. This specific timing." Morrison was quiet for a moment. "The evaluation was already in process. The timing is coincidental." Nathan didn't push it. He filed it and moved on. "When do I need to give an answer?" 2 weeks. "I'll need those 2 weeks." "Of course." Morrison's voice was neutral, professional. "I'd encourage you to think carefully about the long game, Walker. You're a good officer. Don't let a personal situation narrow the field of what's possible for your career." "I appreciate that, sir," Nathan said. "I'll be in touch." He hung up and stood in the kitchen and did not move for a moment. 6 months in Southeast Asia. Senior posting. The kind of assignment he would have said yes to without hesitation. 2 years ago, 1 year ago, probably even 6 months ago. The kind of assignment that was objectively right for the career he had been building. I thought about what the assignment actually meant. 6 months away from Marcus. Video calls and time zones, and the particular specific absence that he knew intimately, had lived inside of before, and had promised himself he would manage differently going forward, because Marcus was older now, and absence landed differently on an 8-year-old than it had on a 5-year-old. He thought about Victoria. Saturday after next. Breakfast in his apartment. What was beginning, whatever it was. I went back to the table. Marcus looked up. He read his father's face the way he always did, quickly, completely. "What happened?" "Work thing," Nathan said. "Don't worry about it." "Is it a thing where you have to go somewhere?" Nathan looked at his son. "Where did that come from?" "You look like the time before your last deployment," Marcus said. "Before you went. You had that face." Nathan sat down. He put his hands flat on the table, looked at them for a moment. Then he looked at Marcus. "Someone offered me a big assignment," he said. "Far away. For 6 months." Marcus was very still. "Oh. I haven't decided anything." "But they want you to go." "They offered. It's a good opportunity." He watched his son's face. "I wanted to be honest with you." Marcus looked at the math homework in front of him. He was quiet in the way he was quiet when he was processing something bigger than he had words for. Yet Nathan knew that quiet had learned to sit inside it without trying to fill it. Then Marcus said, "Would you want to go if I wasn't here, if it was just about you?" Nathan looked at his son. At this question that a 7-year-old had just asked with the directness of someone twice his age. This kid who paid attention to everything and had learned early that the real question was usually underneath the first one. If it was just about me, Nathan said carefully. 6 months ago, I would have said yes without thinking about it. And now? He looked at Marcus. Now I have more to think about. Marcus absorbed this. Then quietly, I don't want you to stay just because of me. If it's something you want. I know. I mean it, Dad. I wouldn't be upset. I'd miss you. But I know you have to do your job. Nathan reached over and put a hand on the back of his son's head, the way he had since Marcus was an infant. The specific weight and warmth of that small skull in his palm, the most grounding thing in the world. You are extraordinary, Nathan said. Do you know that? You say that all the time. Because it's true all the time. He took his hand back. Here's what I need you to understand. I am going to make whatever decision is right for us. Not just for my career. Not just for you. For us as a family. And I'm going to think about it clearly, and I'm going to make the right call. And whatever it is, it'll be right. Marcus looked at him. You promise. I promise. A pause. Then Marcus looked back at his math homework. Okay, he said. Can you help me with these fractions? I don't understand why the bottom number matters. Nathan almost laughed. The bottom number always matters, he said, pulling the homework toward him. It tells you how many pieces the whole thing is cut into. That's dumb, Marcus said. Why can't they just say that? Because math has its own language. I don't like math's language. I know, do it anyway. They worked through the fractions. Marcus got 3 wrong and 2 right, and declared the 2 correct ones obvious in retrospect, which Nathan recognized as the specific defense mechanism of a smart kid, protecting his ego from mistakes, and let it go. Later, after Marcus was in bed and the apartment was quiet, Nathan sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. He wasn't really drinking and thought. I thought about the assignment. About Morrison's voice on the phone, and the timing that was supposedly coincidental. About 6 months, and what 6 months meant now, versus what it would have meant before. He thought about sitting on the terrace with Victoria, the salt air, the specific weight of what she'd said, and what he'd said back. He thought about what Denise had told him. You decided somewhere along the way that needing someone was the same as failing at something. He thought about Marcus asking if it was just about you. He took out his phone. It was late past 10. He typed a message to Victoria anyway, because she was almost always awake past 10. He had learned this. It was one of the many specific things he had learned about her over 8 months that he had not been admitting to himself were the things you learned about people you loved. I got a call tonight. Career opportunity. 6 months overseas. I need to tell you about it before Saturday. He sent it and put the phone face down. 30 seconds later it buzzed. I'm awake. Call me. He called her. She picked up on the first ring. He told her about Morrison and the posting the same way he'd told Denise things plainly, without editorializing, because he wanted her response to be to the facts and not to the way he'd framed them. She was quiet for a moment after he finished. What do you want to do? She asked. I want to know what you think. Nathan, I asked you first. I was quiet for a moment. I don't want to go, he said. I want to be clear about that. Not because of the posting itself. The posting is a good opportunity in objective terms. But 6 months away from Marcus at this point in his life, and 6 months. He paused. 6 months away from something that's just beginning. I don't want to go. Then don't go. It's not that simple. Why not? Because it's my career. Because the Navy doesn't offer opportunities like this twice. Because part of what I've always valued about myself is that I finish what I commit to, that I don't let personal situations determine professional decisions. But you also said, she said carefully, that the mission right now isn't the liaison assignment. He went still. You said that on the plane, she said. That you knew what the mission was. That some things related to Marcus were the mission. A pause. Did you mean that? Yes. Then you already know what you want to do. You're looking for permission to want it. The kitchen was very quiet. Nathan looked at the wall above the stove where Marcus had taped a drawing of a submarine done in crayon, anatomically inaccurate and completely specific to the mind that had made it. "I'm not good at wanting things," he said. "I've gotten good at doing things. Wanting is different." "I know," Victoria said. Her voice was different at this hour, less managed, softer at the edges, the version of her voice that he suspected very few people ever heard. "Nathan, I am not going to tell you what to decide. I would never do that. But I can tell you—" She paused. "Whatever you decide, I'm not going anywhere. That's not dependent on the assignment or the timeline or any of the logistics. I'm telling you that clearly, so it doesn't factor into your thinking as an uncertainty." He absorbed that. "Victoria, let me finish." The same thing she'd said to her mother at the reception, he noticed. "Let me finish." It was what she said when she had decided to say something true. "I have built my entire life around not needing anyone to stay. I have been very successful at it. And I am telling you clearly and without qualification that I want you to stay. Not for me, for Marcus, for the thing you're building here, for the life that is right in front of you." A pause. "And yes, for me." He let that sit for a moment. The specific weight of it. Victoria Hayes, who had spent her entire adult life with her arms crossed, telling him she wanted him to stay. "Okay," he said. "Okay what?" "Okay, I hear you." A pause. And I'm not going." She was quiet on the other end of the line. Then, "You should sleep on it." "I already know." "Nathan." "Victoria, I already know." He looked at the crayon submarine on the wall. "I knew before I called you. I called you because I needed to say it out loud to someone. And you're the someone I wanted to say it to." A long pause. When she spoke again, her voice was very quiet. "Okay." "Okay," he said. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The phone line between them was just breathing and quiet, and the particular closeness of two people who were past the point of pretending they weren't close. "Saturday after next," she said finally. 7:30, he said. "I'll make too much food. I'll be there." "I know." He heard her breathing for a moment. Then, "Good night, Nathan." "Good night, Victoria." He sat at the kitchen table after he hung up and looked at the submarine drawing and the kitchen around him. The old coffee maker. The refrigerator with Marcus's school schedule, magnetized to the front. The chair his son sat in every morning while reading things he'd already read twice, and he felt the weight of the decision settle into him. Not with relief, not with doubt, with something cleaner than both. I thought about Morrison's call. About the careful neutrality in the man's voice, the timing, the specific way. The opportunity had arrived in the same conversation as the documentation of his personal situation. He thought about Alexander Reed, about the way men who operated from angles couldn't quite believe that some people simply didn't. He thought about what it meant to be a man who kept his promises. He had promised Carla, "I will always be there for our son." He had promised Marcus every morning at 4:45 with breakfast on the table, and the day already started. "I'm here. I'm not leaving." He had not promised Victoria anything yet, but he was beginning to understand that a promise didn't have to be spoken to be real. Sometimes it was just the choice you made when the alternatives were clearly available, and you chose anyway. He rinsed his coffee cup, turned off the kitchen light, checked Marcus's door open 2 inches, the way his son liked it. He went to bed. He slept 6 hours, which was 2 more than usual, and in the morning he woke up at 4:45, put his feet on the cold hardwood floor, and breathed. Then he got up and started the coffee and pulled out the pan and cracked 4 eggs and started moving, because that was how it worked. That was how it had always worked. One morning at a time, one meal at a time, one kept promise at a time. The day started. He was exactly where he was supposed to be. He turned down the posting on a Friday morning. He called Morrison directly, which was not how it was typically done. But Nathan had decided that some conversations deserved to be had, person to person, rather than through paperwork. He made the call from his truck in the parking lot of the base before going in with the engine running and the early morning still gray around him. Morrison picked up on the second ring. "Walker." "Commander, I've made my decision regarding the Southeast Asia posting." A pause. "Go ahead." "I'm declining. with respect to the opportunity and full understanding of what that means for the timeline. He said it clearly without hedging, because hedging was how you communicated doubt you didn't actually have. My reasons are personal, and I'm confident they're right. Morrison was quiet for a moment. I want you to be sure about this. I am sure. Opportunities like this don't come twice, I know. Nathan looked out the windshield at the parking lot at the flag at the entrance to the base moving in the early wind. Commander, I've given 11 years to this Navy. I've been where I was sent, done what was asked, and I've never once made a decision based on what was easier. This isn't easier. This is right. He paused. There's a difference. Another pause. Then Morrison said with something that might have been underneath the professional neutrality, a trace of actual respect. Noted. The documentation will reflect a voluntary declination. Thank you, sir. Take care of yourself, Walker. Yes, sir. He hung up. He sat in the truck for another minute. He felt the decision in his body the way real decisions always felt. Not like relief, not like release, but like something coming into alignment. Like the moment on a ship when you've been fighting weather for 3 hours and the bow finally comes around to the right heading and the hull stops fighting itself and everything moves in the same direction. He went inside and did his job. He didn't tell Victoria immediately. Not because he was keeping it from her, but because he had learned over the past weeks of paying attention to who she was, that she needed things she didn't ask for. Specifically, she needed to not feel like she had caused something, and if he told her right away, she would spend energy managing her sense of responsibility for his decision, rather than simply receiving the information as what it was a choice he had made completely on his own terms. He waited until Wednesday. They were in the small conference room after the day's last briefing. Everyone else had gone. The building had that specific late-day quiet that Nathan associated with the actual work. Not the work performed for audiences, but the work done when the room was empty and the problem was real. He said, I called Morrison on Friday. She looked up from the document she was reviewing. And I declined. She held his gaze. She was very still for a moment, in the way she was still when she was absorbing something she'd had a complicated relationship with hoping for. You're sure, she said. I was sure when I made the call. Nathan. Victoria, I need you to hear this clearly. He leaned forward slightly. I did not decline because of you. I declined because of Marcus, because of the life I am building, because the man I want to be does not leave when something real is beginning. You were part of the calculation, yes. You were a real and important part of it. But you were not the only part, and I need you to understand that, because I know how you think I know, you'll take the weight of it if I let you, and I'm not letting you. She looked at him. Something moved through her face that was too complicated to name in a single word, gratitude, and something that resisted gratitude, the specific conflict of a person who was not used to being considered. Okay, she said, quiet, real. Okay, he said. She looked back at the document. He could see she wasn't reading it. After a moment, she said without looking up, Saturday after next is in 3 days. I know. I've been... She stopped, looked up. I don't get nervous. I don't have the capacity for it anymore. I've negotiated too many high-stakes situations for the ordinary physiological response to... She stopped again. I'm nervous. Nathan looked at her. Victoria Hayes, who had stared down boardrooms and federal investigations and a hostile takeover attempt, was sitting across from him in a conference room at the end of a Wednesday, telling him she was nervous about coming to his apartment for breakfast. Good, he said. She blinked. Good? Means it matters to you. He stood, gathered his jacket from the chair. See you Saturday. He walked out before she could respond, because sometimes the right move was to leave a true thing in the room and let it be there without company. Saturday morning he was up at 4:45 as always. I didn't make the usual amount. He made more. He stood in the kitchen and thought about what he knew of her, not as a professional, not as a client, but as a person, and made decisions accordingly. The good coffee, not the everyday coffee. The cast iron pan that took 20 minutes to heat right, but made eggs that were actually worth eating. Fruit cut properly. Juice from actual oranges because he'd bought a bag of oranges on Thursday specifically for this, which he acknowledged to himself was the kind of thing a man did when he had stopped pretending he wasn't paying attention. Marcus appeared at 7, as he always did, trailing the remnants of sleep and wearing one sock. He looked at the amount of food on the counter. Then he looked at his father. "How many people are coming?" he said. "One person." Marcus processed this. "You made a lot of food for one person." "I know." "Is it the lady from your work?" Nathan turned from the stove. "Her name is Victoria. I've mentioned her a few times." "You never call her Victoria when you mention her. You say someone from work." Marcus climbed onto his stool at the counter and looked at the food with the comprehensive attention of someone cataloging resources. "Sophie told me." Nathan stopped. "Wait. What? How do you know Sophie?" "She texted me." Marcus said this with complete casualness, as if this were a normal sentence. "She got my number from Aunt Denise. She wanted to tell me something." Nathan stared at his son. "Sophie Hayes texted a 7-year-old. Almost 8. Marcus was unmoved. "She said your Victoria is really bad at letting people help her, and that I should just act normal and not make a big deal of anything and she'd be fine." Nathan stood very still for a moment. He thought about Sophie at the reception with her shoes in her hands, radiating the particular competence of someone who understood exactly what was happening around her and had decided to be useful about it. "She's right," Nathan said finally. "I know." Marcus picked up a piece of fruit from the cutting board. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you love her?" The kitchen was very quiet. Nathan turned back to the stove and adjusted the flame under the pan. He thought about the honest answer. He thought about what he owed his son, which was always the truth, even when the truth was complicated. "I think so," he said. "It's early, but I think so." "Does she love you?" That's her question to answer. Marcus considered this with the thoroughness he applied to things that mattered. "Is she nice? Like actually nice, not just polite?" Nathan thought about the terrace, about the conference room, about her voice on the phone at 10 at night, the version without management, the one that said, "I want you to stay," with the plainness of something she had decided to stop protecting. "She's honest," he said. "She says what she means." "You said that before, about before I met her." "It's still true." "Okay." Marcus ate the piece of fruit. "I'll be normal. That's all I'm asking." "I'm always normal." "Marcus?" "What?" "You told your teacher last month that fractions were invented to make children sad." "They were." "That is not normal." Marcus appeared to consider this and arrived at the conclusion that normal was a flexible standard, which Nathan let go because it was 7 in the morning and he had a cast iron pan to manage. She knocked at 7:29, 1 minute early. Nathan registered this the way he registered details that told him true things. Victoria Hayes, who was never early, because being early was a form of need display she had trained herself out of, was standing outside his apartment door at 7:29 because she had arrived at 7:15 and stood in the hallway for 14 minutes rather than knock and look eager. He opened the door. She was in regular clothes. Not the armor of the office, not the constructed presentation of the wedding weekend. Dark jeans, a simple top, her hair down, a jacket over her arm. She looked like a person. Just a person standing outside an apartment door, holding a brown paper bag from the bakery 3 blocks away. She held it up. "I didn't know what to bring. Sophie said bring something. I got pastries." "Sophie told you to bring something. Sophie has been advising me extensively." A beat. "She also texted your son." "I heard." Victoria looked at him. The look lasted a half-second longer than necessary, the extra half-second of someone checking, confirming that the thing they'd been afraid might disappear while they weren't looking was still there. It was still there. "Come in," he said. She came in. She stood in the entrance of his apartment and looked at it, not with judgment, not with assessment, but with the specific attention of someone encountering a place that was completely different from their own and trying to understand it honestly. The apartment was small and clean and exact because Nathan kept it exactly as tidy as a man could who was also raising a 7-year-old. There were drawings on the refrigerator and a submarine book on the end table, and Marcus's sneakers beside the door, and the whole place smelled like good coffee and cast iron and orange juice. "It smells like a home," she said quietly, like she hadn't entirely meant to say it out loud. "That's the goal," Nathan said. Marcus appeared from down the hall, fully dressed, both socks on which Nathan recognized as a deliberate effort that he appreciated. His son looked at Victoria with the direct, comprehensive attention that he aimed at everything he found worth understanding. Victoria looked back at him. A moment passed. "Hi," Marcus said. "I'm Marcus." "I know," Victoria said. "I'm Victoria." "I know." Another moment. "My dad made a lot of food." "I brought pastries." Marcus looked at the brown bag with approval. "What kind?" "The woman at the bakery said these ones were the best," Victoria said. "I don't actually know what they are." Marcus took the bag, looked inside, and nodded with the authority of someone who had strong opinions about pastries. "These are good," he said. "Come on, the food's going to get cold." He turned and went to the kitchen. Victoria looked at Nathan. Something on her face was undone slightly, soft in a way he saw rarely. She had been prepared for something harder than this. "He's exactly what I thought he'd be," she said quietly. "What did you think he'd be?" "Yours," she said. "Completely yours." They went to the kitchen. Breakfast lasted 2 hours, not because there was any performance of it. No effort made to extend it, no conversation pushed to fill space. It lasted 2 hours because it moved the way real things moved at their own pace, without anyone managing them. Marcus talked about submarines and the school project he was doing on the Pacific Fleet, and the specific injustice of fractions, and also at one point, a detailed account of a dream he'd had about a whale that could talk, but only spoke in questions which Victoria listened to with complete seriousness, and then asked 3 follow-up questions that Marcus clearly found intellectually satisfying. Nathan watched this. He watched Victoria with his son, and felt something settle in him that had been unsettled for a very long time. Not loudly, not with drama. Just settling like water finding its level. At one point, Marcus left the table to get something from his room, and Victoria looked at Nathan across the table over her coffee cup and said in a low voice, "He asked if the whale could control the weather with its questions. I told him that was the most logical extension of the premise." "Did you mean that?" "Absolutely." She looked at the hallway Marcus had gone down. "He's brilliant, Nathan, the way his mind moves." "I know." "Does he know?" "He's 7. I try not to make it weird." "Don't wait too long," she said. "Knowing you're smart doesn't ruin you. Not knowing makes you spend too much energy doubting." He looked at her. "Personal experience." She looked back at her coffee. "My father used to tell me, every morning before school." Her voice was quiet. "He'd say, 'You're the sharpest person in that building, including the teachers. Don't let anyone make you forget it.'" A pause. "He died when I was 22. That was the last thing I had from him that felt intact. After he was gone, there was just my mother's version of it, which was more complicated." "I'm sorry," Nathan said. "Don't be. I'm telling you because—" She looked up. "I want you to know things about me. The real things. I'm not good at offering them, but I want to try to be better at it." He looked at her across the breakfast table in his small apartment, with the drawings on the refrigerator, and the sound of Marcus coming back down the hall. "You're doing fine," he said. She almost smiled. "I'm really not." "Victoria, you're at a table in someone's apartment on a Saturday morning eating pastries and talking about talking whales. For you, this is tremendous growth." She did smile then. The real one, the one that changed her whole face. "That is the least flattering thing anyone has ever said to me." "Is it true?" A pause. "Yes." "Then it's a compliment." Marcus came back with the submarine book and wanted to show Victoria a specific diagram of a ballistic missile submarine that he felt was drawn inaccurately, and Victoria put on her reading glasses, which Nathan had never seen her wear. She apparently used contacts in the office and looked at the diagram with genuine focus and said, "You're right, the sail height is wrong, relative to the hull length." And Marcus looked at her like she had just become the most interesting person he had ever met. Nathan drank his coffee and said nothing, and felt entirely quietly, without performance, happy. The end of the month review came. Nathan sat across from Rourke and laid out the situation with the same plainness he brought to everything. The personal relationship had moved beyond the professional context. The liaison arrangement as currently structured was compromised by that, and he was recommending either a structural reassignment of the liaison role or a formal separation of professional responsibilities that would create appropriate distance between his role and Victoria's direct oversight. Rourke listened. She made notes. She looked up at the end. Hayes Technologies has requested a continuation of the liaison arrangement, she said. Nathan kept his expression neutral. That's their prerogative. They've also requested specifically that it not be you. He paused. Victoria requested that. Her legal team submitted the request. The framing was that given the personal situation, having the same officer in a liaison role created ethical complexity that the company preferred to resolve cleanly. Rourke looked at him. She protected you, Nathan. By requesting the reassignment herself, she took the pressure off you professionally. The decision reads as company-initiated, not officer-initiated. Your record stays clean. He sat with that for a moment. Victoria Hayes had thought 3 steps ahead. She always thought 3 steps ahead, and had quietly, without telling him, made a move that protected his career, at the same time that it removed the professional complication from between them. She hadn't mentioned it. She hadn't made it a gesture. She had just done it the way she did everything she considered obvious. Okay, Nathan said. You'll be reassigned to a standard shore duty posting effective next month, Norfolk. Rourke looked at him. It's a good posting. I know. She's good for you, Rourke said, which was the second time she had offered something personal in this professional context, and Nathan understood it as the highest compliment she was capable of giving. I think so too, he said. He told Victoria that evening. He drove to her building the first time he'd been there outside of a professional context and texted her from the lobby. She came down herself, rather than sending someone, which he noticed. She walked out of the elevator in the same dark jeans from Saturday, and he thought about how much he preferred this version to the armor, and then thought about how she had earned the right to both. She looked at him in the lobby. Rourke told me, he said. I figured she would. You should have told me first. You would have argued with me. Probably. It was the right call. She said it without apology, because she was right and she knew it. The liaison arrangement was always going to end when this became real. I just made sure it ended in a way that didn't cost you anything. That's not a big gesture, Nathan. It's just logical. That's what I'm talking about, he said. The way you think. The way you just handle things, quietly, without making it about you. She looked slightly uncomfortable, which meant he'd seen something she hadn't intended to display. Don't make it sentimental. Victoria. What? He crossed the lobby and stopped in front of her close enough that they were having a different kind of conversation than the one their words were carrying. Thank you, he said, for what you did. She looked up at him. You're welcome, she said quietly, and for once didn't follow it with anything. He reached out and took her hand. She looked down at it, at his hand over hers. And then she did something he had never seen her do in 10 months of knowing her. She simply let it be there without managing it, without making a decision about it. Just let his hand hold hers in the lobby of her building on a Thursday evening, and let that be enough. They stood there for a moment. Marcus wants to know if you'll come to his school thing, Nathan said. Next Thursday. It's a presentation on Pacific naval history. He's been building a model for 3 weeks. She looked up at him. He wants me there. He asked specifically. He said, and I'm quoting directly, do you think Victoria would come? She knew the sail height was wrong. She would appreciate the model. Victoria made a sound that was almost not quite a laugh. He's testing me. He's inviting you. Nathan looked at her. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what time? 6:30. I'll be there. Good. They walked out of the building together. He drove her to a diner 3 blocks away, Not because it was a special place or an impressive choice, but because it was good and real and open late. And that was what the evening called for. And they sat in a booth and ate, and talked for 2.5 hours about things that had nothing to do with defense contracts, or career decisions, or family weekends. They talked about his first deployment, which had been terrifying and necessary, in the way that the things that formed you were always both. They talked about the year she had nearly lost the company, which she had never told anyone in full, and which she told him now, because she had decided she was done with partial truths in this specific direction. They talked about Marcus and what kind of person he was going to be, and they had a respectful disagreement about whether his submarine fixation would evolve into an engineering path or a historical one. And Nathan said he didn't care what it evolved into, as long as Marcus kept asking the questions he was already asking, and Victoria said that was exactly the right answer, and she wished someone had said it to her at that age. The diner filled up and emptied and filled up again around them. Neither of them moved. At some point, without it being a moment or a decision, her foot was resting against his under the table. Neither of them mentioned it. Neither of them moved it. 1 year later, Nathan Walker woke up at 4:45. He put his feet on the floor. He breathed. Then he got up. The apartment was the same apartment. Slightly updated a few things that had arrived over the course of a year, through the ordinary accumulation of a life that was no longer entirely solitary. A better coffee maker, because Victoria had quietly researched coffee makers for a week, and then appeared with one on a Saturday morning with the explanation that the old one was an embarrassment to the concept of coffee. Marcus's drawings still on the refrigerator, but there were more of them now, and some of them were different. Submarines, still always submarines, but also ships and ocean maps. And in the last 3 months, increasingly detailed diagrams that showed a mind beginning to move from loving a thing to understanding it. Nathan made breakfast. He made more than he needed for 2, because there were 3 now on Saturday mornings, and had been for a while. Marcus appeared at 7. He was 8 now. Both socks because he had decided at some point in the last 6 months that wearing matching socks was a personal standard he intended to maintain, which Nathan had said nothing about and was quietly proud of. "Is she coming?" Marcus said. "She's coming. I have something to show her." He went back down the hall and came back with a diagram hand-drawn 6 pages. A submarine design. Labeled. Dimensionally annotated. Structurally considered in a way that a professional naval engineer would have found more than competent. Nathan looked at it. "When did you make this?" "This week." Marcus looked at it with the critical eye of its creator. "There's one part I'm not sure about. I want to ask Victoria." Nathan looked at his son. At the diagram. At the specific evidence of a mind that had been given room to grow and had grown. He thought about what Victoria had said in the apartment a year ago. "Don't wait too long. Knowing you're smart doesn't ruin you." "She'll know," Nathan said. "I know she'll know." Marcus rolled the diagram carefully. "Dad?" "Yeah." "I like when she's here." Nathan looked at him. "I know you do. I like that you like when she's here." He said it with the specific directness of someone who had been thinking about it and had decided it was a thing worth saying clearly. "It's different now. The house is different. You're different." He considered his own words. "Better different." Nathan put his hand briefly on his son's head. "Yeah," he said. "Better different." Victoria knocked at 7:28, 1 minute early, same as always. Nathan had long ago stopped pretending he didn't know she stood in the hallway for some amount of time before knocking, and she had long ago stopped pretending she arrived precisely on time. It was one of the small true things between them, the version of her that she allowed him to see, which included the fact that she was always a little early because she wanted to be there, and the part of him that noticed and never made it awkward. He opened the door. She had the bakery bag. Same bakery, different pastries, because she had worked her way through the entire menu over the course of the year with the methodical thoroughness she brought to everything. She looked at him. He looked at her. "Marcus has a diagram," Nathan said. "Of course he does. He has questions about the structural component. I have answers. I know you do." She came in. Marcus appeared from his room at a velocity that confirmed he had been listening for the knock, which Nathan had known, and which Victoria had clearly also known, because she produced from the bakery bag, separately wrapped the specific pastry Marcus had declared his favorite in month 3 of Saturday mornings. "I have something to show you," Marcus said. "I know," Victoria said. "Show me." They went to the table. Nathan brought coffee and orange juice and the rest of the food and sat across from both of them and watched Victoria Hayes, the woman who ran a $2 billion company and had once cleared a boardroom with a single sentence lean over a hand-drawn submarine diagram across the breakfast table from an 8-year-old and say with complete seriousness, "Your pressure hull calculation here is conservative in a good way, but if you increase the frame spacing by this much and draw a small amendment in the margin with her pen, it would hold better at depth." Marcus looked at the amendment, then at her. "How do you know that?" "I've read a lot of engineering reports." "Do you like engineering?" "I like things that work," she said, "and I like knowing why they work." Marcus nodded. This was apparently the correct answer. "Dad says that about people too. He says he likes knowing why people do what they do." Victoria looked at Nathan. "Does he?" "He probably learned it from his dad," Marcus said, in the tone of someone delivering a conclusion they'd reached through careful analysis. Nathan drank his coffee. Victoria looked at him across the table over the diagram over the bakery bag and the orange juice and the ordinary beautiful noise of a Saturday morning that had become the best part of every week. She looked at him the way she had looked at him on the terrace on the first night when she had let the management down and allowed herself to be seen. The same look, but different now, deeper in it, steadier without the uncertainty that had been underneath it then. Not a look that was asking anything. A look that had already arrived. He looked back at her the same way. Marcus said something about Keel Designs. They both turned to listen. The morning moved forward at its own pace, without anyone managing it, without anyone performing it. 3 people around a kitchen table. Breakfast made from scratch. A diagram full of careful questions. A coffee maker that worked. An ordinary Saturday. The kind of ordinary that took real courage to choose, and real faith to keep choosing every day, against everything that was easier and safer and smaller. Nathan Walker had spent 11 years learning what duty meant, and what sacrifice meant, and what it meant to keep a promise in conditions that made promises difficult. He had stood watches in freezing weather and said goodbye to his son through a screen, and carried the weight of an absence he had chosen because he believed it mattered. He still believed it mattered. He always would. But he had also learned in the year that had just passed that the hardest mission was not the one that took you away from home. It was the one that asked you to build one, to show up, to stay, to make breakfast at 4:45 and let someone in and trust that the life you were making one morning at a time was worth the making. He had made that choice. He kept making it, every day, without doubt. Some men measured their worth in rank and posting and the scale of what they commanded. Nathan Walker measured his in this, a boy with a submarine diagram, and a woman with her reading glasses, and a bakery bag, and a kitchen that smelled like home, and a morning that nobody had to perform, and a life that was completely finally without reservation his own. That was the mission. He had accomplished it.